Let's say you're going about your day and you see this. How do you open? What's the best way to approach her? Well, it's a trick question. If you're like most guys, you don't approach her because you don't feel worthy of her. You don't feel like you're good enough. And then all the excuses kick in. She looks like she doesn't want to be bothered. She wouldn't be attracted to a guy like me. I don't want to have to deal with her shit. It's not worth my time. And so you do nothing and slink away. Then you go home and fap to porn and try to pretend you don't have a problem. Now, why does this happen? What's the actual root cause of this feeling of being unworthy or not good enough for the girls you want? A lot of people tell you it's because of trauma. It's because of something that happened to you maybe when you were a kid. And that is wrong. In actual fact, the reason you feel this sense of unworthiness is not because of something that happened to you, but because of something that didn't happen to you. And what didn't happen to you is that you have not had a mystical awakening experience. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how a certain mystical experience or spiritual awakening can make you highly charismatic to women. I'm going to show you how to hack your brain chemistry to force it to have this mystical awakening experience. I'm going to show you how to have a psychedelic experience without actually doing psychedelics. And I'm going to show you why having this mystical experience and integrating it is the key to being able to approach women with ease. It's the key to finally feeling worthy of the most beautiful women and of being able to talk, flirt, and joke around with girls you just met while feeling just as comfortable as you would be talking to your own family members. And ultimately, not to be vulgar, but just to make this clear, this gets you laid. It makes beautiful women extremely sexually attracted to you. It makes you magnetic, and it gets to the point where not only can you easily approach them, but they will actually start approaching you in many cases. It's like you radiate this aura of pure love and benevolence, and women just physically cannot stay away. Now, these words, mystical awakening experience, they're just words. They're just labels. The truth is, what I'm going to be talking about here is not something you can actually put into words. It's an experience that transcends any kind of language or any description that can be given in English. In Zen Buddhism, they talk about Satori experiences. Satori refers to the experience of awakening, enlightenment, or apprehension of the true nature of reality. The word Satori roughly translates as awakening, comprehension, understanding. And a major aspect of this kind of experience is that when you have it, you will have a very clear sense that you have woken up. You were asleep before, but now you are awake. That was false. This is real. And when you are awake, things change significantly. In many cases, this experience will change major aspects of your personality. And this flows down into your life, your relations with other people, and many other things. So right away, first off, I realize that when I say something like a Satori experience of mystical enlightenment gets you laid, I realize that's highly incongruous. Those things don't normally go together. And to explain why this experience of enlightenment or mystical states of consciousness gets you real results with women in the real world, I need to briefly tell you the story of how I stumbled into this. So, long story short, when I was a young man, I was extremely shy. I was something of a social outcast at school. I had almost no friends. I was a virgin, never kissed a girl, never had a crush on a girl who liked me back. And I was very, very unhappy about that. But then one night, I did a drug called MDMA. Now, I'm not advocating drug use here. I'm just telling you the honest story of what happened to me. And what happened next completely shattered my reality. I was at this party, and not only was I able to approach women confidently and talk to them with ease, but I actually made out with a girl, and she was hot. And then I made out with another girl. And then a little bit after that, a pretty sexy older woman actually invited me to the bathroom to hook up with her. And the rest of the night was a blur, but long story short, by the time that party had ended, I had either kissed or fooled around with nearly every single female there. Now, that might not seem like much to you, but for me, as a guy who at the time was painfully shy around the opposite sex and who couldn't even dream of cold approaching a woman in years, this was like stepping into an alternate dimension. And so at the time, I started partying a lot and doing this drug MDMA, among other drugs. But obviously that's not sustainable. Drugs wreak havoc on your health. And in particular with a drug like MDMA, the come downs can be pure hell. But what happened was, because of those experiences, I started to become obsessed with figuring out how to replicate the same mental state I got on MDMA while fully sober. And the reason I wanted to do this, to be perfectly frank with you, is that I wanted those superpowers with women which MDMA had given me. Because, when I wasn't on the drug, I just went back to being exactly as shy and anxious as I'd been before, which is one of the reasons I really do not recommend doing drugs for this purpose, because it doesn't actually integrate into your everyday life. So I began studying everything I could find about hacking your own brain chemistry, biohacking, supplements, different meditation or awareness techniques. And within about 5 years, I had figured out a formula to put myself into what I call God mode on command, which is basically the MDMA or psychedelic high while sober. Now, why is this important? Why is it valuable? Because again, it allows you to approach women with ease, feel totally comfortable around them, not be afraid of rejection, and also even to have a certain kind of recklessness. In Eastern mysticism, this is called moksha, freedom, liberation. And because I found ways to not only trigger the state in myself, but also to integrate it so that it became a more or less permanent part of me, I now go out and get the same miraculous results I did that first night doing MDMA while fully sober. And now it's so normal and routine for me to make out with different girls and take one home that nowadays I barely even think about it, to be honest with you. It's as normal as going grocery shopping or something, you know? In other words, what once was impossible is now inevitable. And I've used this power, quote unquote, to date some very beautiful women. You know, like some of the girlfriends I've had who you can see on screen now. I've had to censor them heavily for obvious reasons, but a lot of these are girls who, if you saw them side by side with me, you would think they're pretty out of my league. You know, they're a lot younger than me in most cases, very pretty, fit, athletic bodies. And if you saw me with one of these girls, you'd probably be thinking, how the hell did that little dork pull that girl? And what I'm telling you is that it all comes down to this. It all comes down to attaining the Satori experience and integrating it. It comes down to attaining the psychedelic state of consciousness, but without needing to actually do psychedelics.
I feel that I am merely an agent, giving you some keys which have been given to me to pass on to you. These keys are to unlock doors out of your present prison, doors opening on new vistas, doors beyond where you are now.
So, this video is going to be divided into two parts. In the first part, I'll show you what opening this door actually is and what you can expect. And this really all boils down to a term called non-duality or non-dual awareness, which I'll explain more in a second. And then in the second part, I'm going to show you the 5 occult secrets to trigger this mystical awakening experience and attain this state of non-dual awareness. Now, when I use the word occult there, I'm not saying this is about channeling demons or making a deal with the devil. The word occult simply means hidden, secret, or concealed from ordinary view. And that really is the key to all this. This is about ways of seeing. It's about seeing things as they are and not as you have been conditioned or programmed to see them. It is about awakening to the truth of what reality actually is at the most fundamental level. Aleister Crowley described this experience of attaining non-dual awareness as being like waking up from a nightmare. When you have a nightmare and you feel this intense relief that it wasn't real and you're awake now, that's pretty much a concentrated form of what it feels like to achieve Satori. So, you know, people have a lot of bad connotations with this word occult. They think it refers to human sacrifice or something. What it actually refers to is waking up from the nightmare that is normal life and normal human perception. Alright, so what actually is this mystical awakening experience? What actually is it that Zen monks and so on achieve after years of effort and discipline when they finally attain Satori? What is at the root of the joy and bliss and sense of connectedness that people feel when they take drugs like MDMA or LSD? Well, it all comes down to something called non-dual awareness, or simply non-duality. And this is the feeling, not the suspicion or the belief or the hope, but the full knowing and completely doubtless understanding that, as Bill Hicks put it, we are all one consciousness, experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Which sounds like a bunch of hippie bullshit.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
But it's true. The hippies were right. Timothy Leary was right. They were extremely misguided and, in modern parlance, libtarded. But fundamentally, the core insight, the core intuition that they had as a result of attaining Satori experiences using LSD-25 was 100% correct. Arguably, the hippies and the counterculture of the 1960s destroyed Western civilization, and their influence produced toxic effects which we're still feeling to this day, and which have turned the dream of Western civilization into an endless nightmare. So understand here, when I say the hippies were correct, I am speaking as a guy who is politically somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. Richard Nixon is a personal hero of mine, and I have some other heroes who perhaps I shouldn't mention. So I'm not some communist saying this. I think that on balance, the social effects that LSD and the Summer of Love and all that stuff produced in the long term were almost completely negative. They pretty much ended Western civilization as we know it. They made it go down a wrong path, and whether it will ever find its way again is anyone's guess. But what you have to understand is that the hippies destroyed Western civilization because they were right. The fact that what they were saying about how we are all one consciousness is actually fundamentally true is precisely what made it so dangerous. Because this recognition, this Satori experience, happened to people en masse as a result of taking LSD. And the vast majority of people were not prepared for that experience. They had not earned that experience. And so by doing LSD, they essentially cheated their way to having this understanding, which is normally only accessible after many years of terribly hard inner struggle. But because of acid, all these people in the 1960s were able to get it, bam, like that, instantly. No work, no effort required, no spiritual preparation necessary. And the results of this, like I said, have been a nightmare. In the early 1970s, economic growth and technological progress came to a complete halt and has never recovered, with only a few minor exceptions in things like computers. The Faustian flame of the West was extinguished. Science degenerated, art degenerated, architecture degenerated. Ugliness, and not beauty, became the primary virtue. And putting everyone and everything into a giant blender to produce a disgusting stew of bland uniformity, aka equality, became the only animating goal towards which the entire machinery of modern Western states now strive. In short, because of acid, people in the West saw the face of God before they had been properly prepared to receive it, and it burned the eyeballs out of their sockets, rendering them permanently blind. And the result of this, of introducing this new technology of LSD to the American society of the 1960s, was comparable to what would happen if you were to give nuclear weapons to a primitive tribe. They would soon destroy both themselves and everything around them. And yet, that would not disprove the science of nuclear energy itself. It would not show that the equations which describe the nuclear force are in error. On the contrary, the destructive power of nuclear weapons prove exactly the opposite, that the scientific insights behind it are right. They are in perfect accord with the nature of reality. That's precisely what makes those insights so dangerous in the wrong hands. And so it is with awakening to the truth of non-duality. In the 60s, people en masse had this experience of realizing that we are all one consciousness. It destroyed our civilization, possibly permanently. But that doesn't mean the underlying experience was wrong or in error. On the contrary, the fact that non-duality is fundamentally true, more true than our normal mode of perception, is precisely what made it so catastrophically dangerous. So, what is non-duality? As I said, this refers to the awareness that we are all one. There is no conflict, there is no division, there is no fundamental antagonism between anyone or anything. There is no death, nor can there ever be. What you are, the consciousness that is looking out through your eyes right now, has always existed, will always exist, and cannot be destroyed. Furthermore, the consciousness that looks out through your eyes is made of the same material. It is one limb of the same organism as the consciousness that looks out through other people's eyes. Now, right away, you need to understand that this is not an intellectual thing. This is not a philosophy. This is not a doctrine. And even these words I'm using to describe it, like we're all one or non-duality, these are just labels to attempt to describe the experience. They are not the experience itself. The experience itself is something that you'll normally get during meditation or by doing some of these techniques I'm going to get to. But it cannot be conveyed in words. You also can't convince anyone of the importance of this using words. Trying to put this into words is like trying to describe the taste of a food to someone who's never eaten that food. So don't get caught up and distracted by the words here. I'm talking about an experience. I'm going to show you how to trigger that experience for yourself, and when you have it, you'll know you had it. But as a preliminary, I'm just trying to give you a general outline of what to expect and what you're kind of aiming at. Now, to bring this back to our core theme, why is this mystical awareness of non-duality so powerful when it comes to attracting women? Well, Robert Anton Wilson talks about this idea of reality grids. You know, you can look at the world through one reality grid, or you can look at it through a different reality grid. The reality grid we are all conditioned to view things through is that of separation. You are an independent individual consciousness who is alone and cut off from other people. It's me versus them, as in others, or it's even me versus it, as in the impersonal world itself. And so your self needs to protect itself from other selves who are threats and who are potentially hostile factors in your environment. Now, if you buy into that frame or that reality grid, it's completely inevitable that you'll experience things like approach anxiety, social anxiety, depression. You're going to find it hard to talk to women. You're not going to feel worthy of them. You're not going to have the courage to approach them. And if you do approach them, you're going to run out of things to say. But there is a different reality grid, a different frame, which is what I call the LSD frame. Or you could call it the we are all one consciousness frame. In this reality grid, there is no separation between you and other people. There is no division. The boundaries we see between things, between ourselves and other people, are actually an illusion. It's an illusion which is created by evolution, which I'll get to in a moment. But the truth is, in fact, that all living beings are part of the same consciousness. We are all one. And the feeling, the belief that we are separate and different from each other is simply a very persistent delusion. This is a delusion with a time limit. It ends as soon as your physical body dies. And then, as thousands of people who've had near-death experiences report, you feel yourself ascending back to the actual reality, which has been described as an infinite sea of cosmic love. And you realize that, in fact, behind appearances, the reality is, and the reality has always been, that you are other people. Other people are you. We are all one. There is no separation whatsoever. But while we're here in a physical body, we can only see the illusion created by the body. And the reason for this is evolutionary. Again, to quote Robert Anton Wilson, most of our ancestors were not perfect, ladies and gentlemen. The majority of them weren't even mammals. Now, the problem with the sensation of universal oneness is that it has a clear evolutionary disadvantage. An animal in nature that has a sense that we are all one and that death is imaginary and therefore there's nothing to be afraid of is not going to protect its physical body. It's going to allow itself to be eaten by a predator because for this awakened animal, it recognizes that it and the predator are one. And therefore, there is no reason whatsoever for it to resist being eaten. Because in fact, the animal doing the eating is the same as the animal being eaten. So why resist? As Christ put it, resist not evil. And if someone hits you on the left cheek, offer them the right. Why? Because it doesn't matter. None of this matters. This dimension we're in is just like a virtual reality video game. While you're on Earth in a physical body, it's like you're wearing this VR headset and you're in this video game and it seems very real, but when you die, you'll realize it was just a game. It was just a simulation. Now, this is the truth with a capital T. But again, the reason we don't naturally see it this way is because evolution hid the truth from our eyes. Evolution has conditioned us to perceive a false boundary between us and other beings because that is what leads to the survival of our genes. As the saying goes, only the paranoid survive. And so everyone pops out of the womb hard-coded to feel this sense of separation, anxiety, paranoia, discontent, fear, worry, and stress at almost all times. It's entirely natural and it's insane. But when you experience moksha, liberation, when you have a Satori awakening, again, as Crowley put it, it's like waking up from a nightmare. You realize, oh wait, this was all a huge misunderstanding. Everything is fine. There's a sense of total inner peace and complete acceptance. And with this comes a quiet confidence that you never had before. You are completely open to the present moment. You're willing to make yourself vulnerable because you realize there's really no consequences. Nothing actually matters. Get the girl, don't get the girl. Get rejected, get laid. You will feel exactly as happy and at peace either way. Success and failure are pairs of opposites, dualities, which depend upon each other and mutually support each other. There is in fact no difference between them at all. It's like a blind man touching two different parts of the body of a large animal and assuming they're two different animals, not realizing they're simply different parts of the same beast. And this new perspective causes you to move through the world very, very differently to how you did before. You know, among other things, when you see that hot girl, approaching her is just no big deal. You don't feel like you're unworthy of her because in truth, you know there is no such thing as you and her at all. These are artificial distinctions, artificial boundaries which don't really exist. They are merely a result of our deluded perception. Now, this tends to make you really, really confident. But it's not even that you feel confident. It's not like, I'm the shit, I'm the best, girls will be lucky to have me. It's not a positive confidence. It's more like a negative confidence. There's no reason why I'm not enough, to quote Alexander. This also means there's no antagonism between you and the girl. You know, a lot of guys are unconsciously in an us versus them frame with women. And this translates down into a feeling of me versus her when you're actually in the interaction. But when you realize that us versus them or me versus her is an illusion, then everything just becomes really, really easy. Everything just works. You approach, it's smooth, it's easy, it's playful, you know what to say. And even if you don't know what to say, you don't mind. If it's awkward, that's fine. Let it be awkward. Awkward or not awkward is all the same. These are merely dualities, pairs of opposites, which secretly depend on each other. So to sum up before we continue, this realization of non-duality is what in Eastern mysticism they call enlightenment. Again, this is not an intellectual thing. This non-duality is something you have to feel in your bones. But when you do feel this and you are enlightened, getting girls becomes extremely easy. Enlightenment gives you a powerful charisma. It gives you a quiet yet invincible confidence. And simply put, it just makes you happy. It makes you feel good regardless of your external circumstances. And because happiness is contagious, this makes you very attractive to women. And this really makes it so that the things you think are holding you back in dating, like looks or money, you realize what a complete joke that actually is. It's like thinking no one likes you because you have the wrong color shoes or because your hat keeps falling off. Okay, so now that we've gone through what Satori actually is, a state of non-dual awareness, I'm now going to reveal the 5 secrets to trigger this mystical awakening experience and integrate it into your everyday life so that enlightenment becomes more or less your baseline natural state. So, the first key to understanding this is that consciousness is chemical. And if you change the chemistry of your brain, you change your consciousness. An obvious way this happens is with drugs, but you do not have to take drugs to awaken to the truth of non-duality. There are many highly effective ways to change your brain chemistry to attain this state without ingesting toxic substances. Now, a few of the common ones. The baseline is make sure you're eating right. Healthy foods only. Cut out all processed foods. Cut out anything that has seed oils. Get your testosterone levels high. Eat lots of protein like beef, eggs, salmon, nuts. Take supplements for testosterone like zinc, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, selenium, cod liver oil, grass-fed butter. Make sure you're getting lots of exercise, fresh air, lots of sunlight. Get 8 hours of sleep a night, get blackout blinds and wear a sleep mask. These things are the basics. Obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but you really need to set up the right environment in your body to produce a high quantity of the chemicals that put you in the mystically enlightened state. Now, the next secret to attaining a mystical awakening experience is semen retention, and this is really the biggest key of all. Attaining these higher states requires a huge amount of energy. And this energy is very, very expensive for the body to produce. The highest potency form of energy the body can produce is sexual energy. That is to say, semen, seed. In Taoism, they call this Jing, vital energy. It's related to Qi, life force, the universal energy that underlies all creation. And when you do semen retention and you infuse your body with extremely high levels of Jing Qi, it almost sort of forces you to have a psychedelic experience. Like at a certain point, it actually almost cannot be avoided. I remember once I was on a forum talking about nofap, and this one guy said, "Man, I had to stop doing semen retention because after a while it started making me feel all these weird emotions." And I was like, you dumb jackanape, that's literally the point. What do you think this is all for? The point of semen retention is to have these breakthrough mystical experiences and insights. The point of semen retention is to awaken, to attain moksha, liberation, to have a profound and shattering experience of the underlying reality that we are all one. And yeah, often when this happens, you may find that you've got tears streaming down your face. And if you're somebody who's extremely repressed and that's going to be a problem, then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe enlightenment isn't for you. Go back to watching TV. So, semen retention is the key to attaining non-dual awakening, the psychedelic state, while sober. This is essential. I've tried all kinds of meditation techniques, awareness techniques, and so on, but nothing worked until I started doing semen retention. And that's when everything clicked. I call this practice red magic, as distinct from either black magic or white magic. And I have a long video explaining how to do red magic and semen retention the right way, which you can watch some other time. But just to explain the bare bones of this, semen retention means you don't ejaculate at all, no masturbation, no sex for a certain period of time. But then also, while you're doing semen retention, it's very important that you accompany it with this third thing on this list, which is the abolishment of lust, aka sexual transmutation. So what you'll find when you quit masturbating is that you're going to become very, very horny. Duh. And this is going to massively increase your temptation to watch porn or even just to think about sex and fantasize about sex. But to get the full benefits of semen retention, and especially the animal magnetism that comes with it, you need to completely abolish lustful thoughts, which means no watching porn, no edging, no fantasizing for longer than a few seconds. And you also need to transmute your sexual desires into productive manly activities like working out, approaching women, making money, making art, or better yet, all of the above. This took me a long time of trial and error to learn, but basically you'll find that even if you're not ejaculating when you watch porn or engage in lustful thoughts, it subtly messes up your vibe. You don't have that same animal magnetism as you get when you completely abolish all lust. But if you don't ejaculate and you don't watch porn or indulge in any lustful fantasies at all for about 2 or 3 weeks, you'll generally find that women are naturally more attracted to you. They gravitate towards you. They're more friendly towards you. But when you then break your streak and you fap, or even just watch porn for a few hours without fapping, you'll find in the days afterwards that women go back to being hostile and standoffish when you try to talk to them. And I've talked about this at length in the Red Magic video, but in my opinion, this is not just psychological, it's an electrical thing. This is literally about electromagnetism. You know, sperm is obviously a fluid, it's a liquid, and I think that basically that liquid is some kind of conductor for what are essentially electrical impulses. The more seed you accumulate in your body, the more potent that electrical signal becomes. But this electromagnetism is also affected by your thoughts, which makes sense because after all, thoughts are literally electrical signals themselves. And so semen retention and the abolishment of lust mentally literally electrifies you. And this gives you a literal, physical, magnetic field around your body. It gives you masculine polarity, which is physically magnetic to the opposite sex, aka those beings who have a feminine polarity. Okay, now the fourth way of triggering the mystical awakening experience is meditation. Collapsing the boundary between subject and object. I'm not going to spend a long time on this because it's been covered very well elsewhere. You know, these days, meditation is pretty mainstream. There's tons of videos and books talking about the benefits of this and how to do it, so you can watch those if you're interested. But one of the things meditation does, in fact, what is literally the only goal of meditation in Eastern traditions, is precisely to attain this state of non-dual awareness. The collapsing of the boundary between subject and object. That is, between you and your surroundings. You and other people. Now, meditation won't do this every time, but it will do it sometimes after you get kind of good at it. So meditation is a big part of the formula here. Meditation works best in combination with semen retention. Semen retention is like fire. It gives you energy. It gives you vitality. But on its own, it can be extremely frenetic. It can give you too much energy to the point where you can't sleep or you can't stop thinking about sex. And meditation, among other things, allows you to balance that out. And like I said, it's also vital to attaining the state of non-dual awareness, or the feeling that you are one with everything that surrounds you, and the collapse of the boundary between subject and object, to put it in technical terms. Now, there's tons of ways you can learn to meditate. You know, a lot of people download apps for this. Personally, I just keep it very, very simple. Every evening, at least 2 hours after eating, I sit down somewhere, I set a timer to go off in 20 minutes, then I close my eyes and just focus on my breath for those 20 minutes. That's all you got to do. It's not complicated. You don't need to read books about this. Just sit down, focus on your breath. And the idea is you want to get to a point where you're so calm that you no longer have any thoughts. There's just awareness of the present moment. No thoughts, just awareness of the feeling in your body. The feeling in your legs, the feeling of the chair against your back, any sounds you can hear like traffic outside, birds chirping, etc. You're just there, very calm, aware of these physical sensations, but not having any thoughts. That's the goal, quote unquote, with meditation. Now again, you won't always get there. Sometimes the thoughts won't go away. But either way, I found that even if you don't get into that Zen-like state with no thoughts, you do still feel the benefits afterwards. And generally, I find the benefits of doing this are that for roughly the next 24 hours, I feel far more confident, calm, happy, unworried. It's like giving your mind a shower. And yes, among other things, this gives you way more confidence talking to women. It makes you better at staring them down, giving them that calm, grounded, masculine sexual energy. So that's sort of the everyday benefits of meditating, and that on its own would be enough reason to do it. What I'm saying is that when you combine semen retention and purity of thought with a daily meditation practice, after a few weeks or months of doing this, you're going to start having experiences. I don't want to get too much into what these experiences are, but it can get kind of freaky, because when you do these things, meditation and semen retention, they dramatically change the chemistry of your brain. And consequently, you're going to find yourself opening doors and going into states of awareness that really are more or less identical to taking a moderate dose of psychedelic drugs. Now, just these three things, semen retention, abolishing lustful thoughts, and meditation, just those three things, when combined, will give you certain very powerful mystical experiences. For full enlightenment, however, for full awakening in the proper sense of the term, you need one other thing which none of these three things on their own will reliably provide. And that is, you need to burn away the ego. And this is really what separates the men from the boys. This is what separates the true, clear-pilled, psychedelic cult leader, benevolent con man, cosmic intelligence agents from the people who are simply playing at spirituality. Because you cannot burn away the ego without pain. To burn away the ego, you need to undergo terrible inner struggle and conscious suffering. And you cannot do this by sitting alone in your room. Can't be done, never has been done. You need suffering. You need sacrifice. And this brings me to the fifth thing on the list here, which is cold approach pickup to burn up the ego. When you cold approach women on a regular basis, not just once or twice, but when you do this every weekend, for example, like it's a religious sacrament. When you do this, a lot of times it will be fun, but there will be other times when it produces extremely negative emotions. Fear, embarrassment, humiliation, shame. Maybe you approach a girl and she's mean to you. Or maybe she likes you, but then her male friends come in and they're kind of mocking you and clowning on you and you're embarrassed. Or even maybe you approach her and it actually goes well, but now you're kind of just standing there and you don't know what else to say and it's awkward. And none of these things sound like much. Approach a girl and she rejects you and you feel embarrassed. Like, big deal. Who cares, right? It doesn't sound like anything. But when you're the guy who's actually doing that and who's actually experiencing it in that moment for real, this can feel extremely painful. I mean, it can literally feel like you're on fire. Now, what I want to suggest to you is that feeling of embarrassment, that burning sensation, that is good. That is holy. That is God. That is the key to the kingdom of heaven. Because that feeling of embarrassment and that feeling of burning, that is literally the burning up of your ego. And there is no substitute for this. Gurdjieff, the Russian wizard, he said that along with certain meditation and awareness techniques, you need intentional suffering to reach enlightenment. I read that 10 years ago and I have tried many different forms of intentional suffering. Back when I was first learning this, I would do things like I'd force myself to walk home for 10 miles in the rain. I'd take cold showers in winter. I'd fast for a whole day. I'd walk around wearing just a t-shirt in the middle of January. I'd go whole days where I didn't allow myself to sit down. I did all these things. But what I found is that physical suffering is relatively cheap. Pretty much any man who is a man is willing to undergo physical suffering. It's not that hard for us. As men, we are actually pretty elastic in terms of the suffering and privations our body can endure. The real way to enlightenment, however, the true conscious suffering, is when you make your ego suffer. And this is what almost nobody is willing to do. And this comes from doing things like approaching that girl, feeling the embarrassment of doing that, feeling any negative emotions that result from that situation, letting those negative emotions wash over you and not trying to resist them. It's funny because you're not actually in any physical pain, and yet doing this is so much harder than undergoing those physical trials I talked about. And this is the one thing that men will not do. Men will happily undertake any physical sacrifice or pain they're forced to, but they will not allow themselves to be embarrassed. To willingly feel embarrassed, that is the one form of pain men are not willing to expose themselves to. But that is the one thing you have to do to liberate yourself and to burn away the ego to have this mystical experience. And so cold approach is actually an integral part of that process. It's not just the cold approach gets you girls. If that was all it did, it wouldn't be worth it for me. I would have long ago lost interest in this. Cold approach is holy because it not only gets you girls, but it burns away your ego. And it does this in a way that massively accelerates the process of reaching the Satori experience. Now, in this video, I showed you how to become the type of man who women chase. And as you probably already realized, the most important aspect of this is cold approaching girls regularly and getting social momentum from doing that. However, I realize that most guys watching this are scared to approach a girl, and they're realistically not ready to start doing that yet. And if that's you, then the quickest way to get over this fear is to get more confidence. And what's the fastest way to get confidence? Well, it's to get laid. Let's be real here. You're going to be a hell of a lot more confident approaching that 10 if you just banged some other girl earlier this morning, right? And that's why I put together a video for you which shows you how to start getting laid right now without approaching any girls, without risking rejection, and without even leaving your couch. How is this possible? The answer is, of course, online dating. Dating apps like Tinder and Hinge let you get girls to come over to your place to hook up literally at the touch of a button. Now, hearing this, you might say, bullshit, Mike, I've tried online dating and I get no matches, or it's nothing but flaking, ghosting, girls not responding. And if that's you, then I completely understand because that's exactly how it was for me whenever I tried dating apps. But then, bam, 2020 hit, the pandemic, quarantine, lockdowns. I couldn't go out to nightclubs anymore, and so I was forced to get good at online dating or else never get laid at all. And so, through trial and error, I basically became a mad scientist with texting girls to get sex, and I developed a system for online dating and texting that literally gets you perfect 10s in your bed at the touch of a button. I call it the girlfriend button, but a more honest name for it would probably be the f**k button. Because when you push these buttons in a girl's mind over text, it makes her obsessed with sleeping with you right away. From there, you can either have a one-night stand, turn her into your girlfriend, or keep her as a long-term bang buddy. It's completely up to you. So, if that sounds good, click the link in the description now and watch the free video I put together for you on the next page. I'm going to show you 12 magic words you can text a girl to make her obsessed with sleeping with you, so she'll come over to your place to hook up right away. This even works to get girls who've been ghosting you, flaking, or not responding, and it will get you a hot girlfriend or buddy, no matter your looks, money, or age. So, click the link in the description right now and discover the 12 magic words that turn any girl into your girlfriend at the touch of a button.